Please welcome to the stage, Sherida Sessa.
Thank you, Peter. Very exciting things to come for sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Greenbuild. Thank you so much for joining us for what is going to be a very unique perspective on sustainability. This morning, we have with us Mike Richter. Now, I grew up in New York State, upstate, so for me, Mike Richter was a household name. But for you Californians in the room, I'm going to give you a little background on our speaker. Mike played hockey for the New York Rangers from 1989 to 2003. During that time, he led the team to a Stanley Cup victory in 1994. That was the team's first Stanley Cup win since 1940. He competed on several international stages throughout his career, including the Olympics, winning silver for Team USA in 2002. And during his NHL career, he was a 3-time NHL All-Star player and 1-time NHL All-Star Game MVP. Mike's number was retired by the Rangers in 2004, and he was inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame in 2008. So you might be wondering, how does this relate to Greenbuild? Well, following his retirement, Mike went on to attend Yale University, receiving a degree in ethics, politics, and economics with a concentration in environmental policy. Since then, he's become a key spokesperson for environmental issues such as resource efficiency and climate change. He has spoken to the Senate Special Committee on Climate Crises and also served on the boards of the Sierra Club Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, and River Keepers. Mike's current day job is CEO of Brightcore Energy, where he uses his lifelong passion for peak performance to help clients reduce reliance on fossil fuels through a comprehensive approach to both energy efficiency and clean energy resources. Please welcome my friend, Mike Richter, to the stage. Mike, thank you so much for being here and making the trip from New York. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. It's awesome to see people again. I've got a fern at home that's getting tired of seeing me, so being outside is pretty good.
It's so nice to see everybody in 3D. Hi, guys. Okay, so let's start out, Mike, by talking a little bit about your transition from the hockey athletic world into pursuing that degree at Yale. You know, many athletes simply retire after their playing careers, and you have clearly gone a completely different direction. What drove that decision?
Honestly, there's a window that opens up and closes quite quickly in an athletic career, and I knew that going in, and it worked out that I had an opportunity to sign with the Rangers, which meant leaving my undergraduate education at University of Wisconsin-Madison at the time. I went on to play in the Olympic team and sign with the Rangers. I just made a pact with myself that I would finish what I started. So there was just going to be a sense of completion there on a personal level. But also, I think leaving the sports world, I was probably more ready to or able to retire at 25 than I would have been at 35. You become that thing, and it's frankly, it's scary. When you leave, you know what you're doing. You're one of 700 people in the world that can play at that level. And then you're just a 38-year-old guy that's looking for the next thing. And so it was an important segue to kind of get my feet under me. Perhaps most importantly, I also understood that there's a big world out there. And a lot of my peers that I had left at 21 have gone on to do incredible things in the working world. And I'm coming in basically as a freshman there, a rookie, and I needed a lot of training and sort of starting out on the bottom floor. So going back to school was particularly helpful.
Now, you said before that it wasn't just Yale. You did some courses at Cornell and Columbia as well, so he's hitting all the Ivy League institutions.
It's not a pretty transcript in the sense that I did. I went back to Cornell in the summertime, and the hockey season, for those who don't know, really stretches from late August to up to June. You have a few weeks after to regroup, lick your wounds, and then start training again. And that was a great time for me to kind of rest my mind, go and take some classes. It could be a 3-week class, it could be 2 months, and just pick away. When I started having children later on, married with kids, I put that aside, knowing that my career was diminishing, and just focus and elongate as much as possible. But I really felt that the environmental space is something that I felt deeply connected to, and so much of an athlete's time is spent preparing for a game, recovering from a game. You spend a lot of time alone, a lot of time traveling, a lot of time in your hotel by yourself. I have a game tomorrow in Detroit. I'm in Detroit tonight. I eat, I go to sleep, I repeat the next day. So I read a lot of nonfiction books on the intersection between finance and resource constraints, and really felt deeply that that was something I wanted to pursue when my athletic career was over.
We're going to talk about that. A lot of people think that there's not a direct connection between the athletic world and the environmental world that you're in now. So we're going to hit on that in a little bit. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about the hockey side of your career. Brian Leach, one of your teammates on the Rangers, once quoted you saying he has never seen anyone more focused than Mike Richter. As the game got tougher, he got better. And I think that mental toughness is something that probably has stuck with you this entire time and is very applicable in the mission today. Talk to me a little bit about that. How does that affect your current role?
Well, I don't think, it's a nice quote by Brian, who is a supremely talented player, and you could look at that as saying, if you don't have talent, you better work hard. You try to mix both of them. But look, there's experts in this audience across all disciplines, and I don't know too many people that are successful that don't have some level of self-discipline. So I think, having an athletic career, I absolutely loved it. It was more challenging on a personal level than I could have imagined. And so much of what I have in life is because of that foundation. But because you stop a hockey puck in my instance doesn't mean I can do anything else particularly well. It doesn't always translate, but that personal discipline and the understanding of figuring out what needs to be done, setting out a plan and working through it does translate. And I think, Brightcore, my company's a small business. I'm the president of it. I'm primarily client-facing in sales, and so they say in ice hockey and goaltending in particular, which is my position, you have to have a short memory, because I could make the best save of my life right now, or let up a horrendous goal, but all that matters is, am I prepared for the next shot? That's over with, good or bad. And business is the same way. The stakes are higher. You have people that rely on you for their livelihoods. So if you're not coming to your desk prepared, if you're trying to get a foothold, traction, particularly in this COVID environment, I mean, everybody in this room suffered through this and still are. You better be focused, you better have the discipline, and you better have a short memory, because you're going to hit challenges along the way, bumps in the road, expectations not met sometimes, but you have to stay with it. You have to have your plan. I had a coach that always say, plan your work and then work your plan. As catchy and silly as that may be, is very, very true, because we start to deviate quickly as soon as we run into a bump, whether you're on the ice or whether you're in the boardroom, and say, oh my gosh, I had bad feedback from a client. Pivoting, learning from that is one thing, and you need to do it. And for someone coming in as an adult that has less experience than a lot of my peers, it's really crucial to learn. But I think, having that ability to stick to your plan through some of the storms that you're inevitably going to face takes the self-discipline that I did learn in my athletic career.
Having a short memory, that also benefits you in the events industry. Yeah. So, Mike, when we were talking about this session, we talked a lot about performance, and we talked about your performance in the hockey rink, in the hockey arena, and how those buildings and those environments that you played in had a real effect on that performance. So talk to me a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a little more about the building itself.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to me. There's a lot of these anecdotes, and at the risk of sounding quite boring, these are just experiences that I had that they do apply and relate to what we're going through here, you think about the knowledge that's just in this room, or you walk that floor. I walked it yesterday. It was phenomenal just to see some of the products that I've been telling customers that they should be looking at. And a lot of the average person doesn't realize that. You know, if My Pillow guy or new mattresses and all that kind of stuff are out there and saying, hey, you know, you spend a third of your life sleeping, maybe get a good bed. Think of the amount of time that we spend in a building, in our home, at work. And in my athletic career, I've watched great organizations. You know, the NHL, I think, is a $2 billion industry. They're spending a lot of money on the latest free agent, the best equipment, sports psychologists, nutritionists, the best training. It's a competitive environment. And the thing that doesn't really get thought about as much, and you're starting to see a change there, is where we live and work. We worked out in a small place in Rye, New York, north of Manhattan. And it was a city-owned facility. And, you know, musty, moldy locker rooms, leaks in the ceiling. If it was cold outside, it's cold inside. If it was warm outside, the ice was terrible. You know, you have probably a $70 million invested in the athletes on the ice. You'd think the facility is something that you might want to attend to if you care about how many raisins your defenseman's eating. It matters. These are the places we work and live in. And I remember one time we were in LA and the Zamboni was putting out so much exhaust and particulate matter, the building was shut down. It was an unsafe work environment. And it just was smelly and everything else, and you put up with this. But that's the work environment that people put up with all the time. And you wouldn't do that in most aspects of your business. But when it comes to built environment, people don't always make that connection. And the connection, I think, with athletes is very, very clear. Your health is the foundation of your performance. And I guess that sounds pretty obvious, but we don't always make the connection. I love the U.S. Greenbuild. They're saying, you know, healthy people and healthy places is a healthy environment, a healthy economy. But that translates to everything we do. Just give yourself the best chance of reaching your potential, and you can't do that with a half-baked approach to where you're spending your life, the majority of your time.
Absolutely. So what can this industry and the people in this room do to drive that concept further more quickly?
Well, I don't think there's anybody, doing more than the people in this room. I mean, these are the products, these are the services, these are the people that are studying this, the cutting edge technologies. I think what's frustrating to me, having kind of been, I don't want to say divorced from it, been very much interested in it, but I haven't been in this industry my entire life. I'm now retired, almost 20 years, so I have been around a little bit and seen the changes. Just getting it into the lexicon, into the consciousness of everyday people. And who loves solar energy? Who loves a passive house? The people that have experienced it. Who is indifferent? The people who have not experienced it. And so every time there's a meeting like this, every time one more person puts a solar panel on the roof or one more person improves their building envelope, whether it's on a commercial level or a residential level, more people experience that. And there's lots written on that. I think if in a given zip code somebody gets a solar panel, neighbors come over and say, hey, can you still take hot showers? What happens on a cloudy day? What happens at night? And you start to learn, you kick the tires. It's not somebody like me knocking on your door trying to sell something. It's somebody you trust saying, hey man, I put this on there and it's unbelievable. My partner at Brightcore bought a Tesla. And he kept saying how great this Tesla is, how great this Tesla is. Then I drove it. And it's a totally different experience. I mean, it's slick marketing and everything else. I understand the concept of transportation. It looks like a car to me. It looks great, but then you drive it and experience it. If you walk into a passive house and experience it, what the building envelope feels like, what the right temperature is, what the right air exchange is, it's an entirely different experience. And I mean, for lack of being boring, I have a place where I went to high school up in Lake Placid, New York. And a friend of mine put in a house that was carbon negative. He is an interesting guy, a biologist by training, and this was just his project. He had solar panels, geothermal, building envelope that you couldn't believe. From a distance, it looked like a normal house. And I knew some of the guys that were on the construction site. And they're like, this guy's absolutely an idiot. He's a doctor? What? I mean, I know how to build a house, and these walls are 18 inches thick. We have triple pane glass, on and on and on. And I can remember them, these are local guys that know their craft, but hadn't built a house to these standards yet. And so it was all a bit of a joke. And as the winter came, and can get viciously cold up there, it's 12 degrees outside. These guys are in t-shirts once the building envelope's up and the windows are in, finishing off. No heater, just their body heat and their machines that are going. If you're outside and they're hitting a saber saw or whatever it is on the inside, you can't hear it. You walk in, it's a totally different environment. These guys are like, this is unbelievable. I mean, look at us, we're so warm, we don't even have the heat system hooked up yet. And they were believers. These guys were hardened in terms of what the normal way of building things are. Then they experienced what you guys know, and they became, prophets of where we need to be. It was really cool. So I'm just saying, what do we need to do? Every single time you get one example of I guess, a sustainable product or process, it's going to make people believe, and that's key.
You talked to me backstage a lot about changing the terminology that we use when we're talking to these non-believers or the people that haven't experienced it. What do you suggest in that regard?
Well, I've had people in my company, we sell a range of products and processes from solar to lighting and everything else, and I've had people literally tell me, I don't believe in solar. I'm thinking, well, the concept, the efficiency, the look, they do exist. I mean, what aspect of it don't you believe in? But in some ways, it's my own fault, our own fault. Sustainability, green, environmentally oriented. What the heck does that mean to the average person who's trying to put food on their table? I suggest taking the word and just say better. When I drove the Tesla for the first time, yes, I understand the concept that the tailpipe has no emissions, but this thing accelerates faster than a Ferrari, has a low center of gravity because the battery is there. It's safer than a normal car because it doesn't have the engine mounts and can be designed into it. It's better. And the word better is a better terminology than sustainable because we are improving the places we live, the way we transport ourselves, how we live. And it's healthier. The benefits to sustainable buildings and transportation and approach are so many that it sounds like a bad sales pitch. But ultimately, when you're putting in a better building envelope, the people in the building have a fantastic experience as opposed to a conventional built building. And I think it's really important that we're past the time saying, look, we need conservation, turn down the thermostat, put on a sweater, and hope for the best. It's not personal sacrifice necessarily. It's an improvement in the quality of your life. And I don't think that particularly gets spoken about a lot. You're starting to see, there's a rink not far, I live in Connecticut, at Sacred Heart University is putting in a $60 million rink. And it's an absolutely beautiful facility, but they're starting to incorporate this stuff where 3 sides of it are glass now. So during the day, it's this open experience. You get free lighting, of course, but it's a better experience for the people inside. I wouldn't want to be working in a hall is this dark. I mean, obviously it's dark for the reason that we're here, but this is not a good work environment necessarily. This is a tough place to be typing up a term paper or putting a report out. And we're starting to figure out that buildings don't exist by themselves. They house people. And the experience of the occupants of those places, whether it's a residence or office space, matter. And so that performance of the building directly influences the performance of the people inside. And I think that is, it's just not spoken about enough. And we've seen it. We just put an LED system in for a local K through 12 in Westchester, New York. And the assistant principal just had a bad experience. He said, I don't like it. They don't work, they're expensive, this and that, and they're really bright and they're ugly. And well, he had the wrong color temperature. We finished up, it eventually went forward, but he was kind of the guy who was the stick in the mud, and he is now the prophet. He is saying, I can't believe this. I greet the kids, they're happy, they come in, we're always selling, trying to get people here, and it's just a better experience when you walk in our lobby. The classrooms are better, it's a better learning environment. These things have profound effect other than just in this small world that we live in sustainability, saying, hey, we increased our LED score. No, people are learning better, they're performing better, they're happier, they're less stressed. It really matters, and I think we just need to underscore that as much as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's switch gears a little bit. You've spoken to the Senate Special Committee on Climate Crisis, it said in your very eloquent bio. And the Biden administration has obviously taken aggressive steps on climate in the last year. In your opinion, what are the critical actions that the industry can take now to mitigate climate change?
Well, I take full credit for his aggressive steps. After that Senate committee, everything changed.
There we go.
It was interesting, though. I went with a group of athletes, as you can imagine, and they had different industries across the marketplace, talking about how climate changes affect them. And for many years, even when I was back in school, a decade and a half ago, it was your grandchildren are going to really suffer for this. Our kids will see storms that are big. It is not our kids' kids. We all know now, and this is not news, go a month back from Texas to New Jersey to you name it. Big storms, terrible floods, wildfires, all this kind of stuff that's been predicted, but it's coming a little quicker. And there's plenty written on why we may have undershot the effects that we expect. It's usually pretty conservative when science pushes it out there. We're all experiencing this stuff now, and I think, the basis of asking some athletes to come up there and speak was, how does it affect you? Why does this matter? And I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers, but the outdoor recreation industry, sports, is a couple $1 billion industry. It's a big one. So if you just want to look in economic terms, it's affecting a big industry. But I was joined by some just fantastically eloquent, good people that had sports careers too. Most of them were outdoors, skiers. You think about this. The European World Cup downhill skiing season was canceled a couple of years ago. There wasn't enough snowpack, okay? Whitewater rafters, when there's not enough snow melt, there's not enough white water. My sport, ice hockey, the roots of it are formed on the frozen lakes and ponds of North America. A couple things take place though. Who cares about hockey, right? But this was a democratic, in a way, open to everybody, free ice. I talked to Marty Brodeur, who's a guy I played against, and he's a tremendous goaltender. He grew up in Montreal. He said he had 4 or 5 frozen lakes and open ice that he didn't have to pay a dime for. He didn't have much money, and he could walk down the street and play. I grew up in Philadelphia. The ponds froze in Philadelphia. That was an opportunity for me to work on my game, whatever it was, at 8, 9, 10 years old. Nowadays, ironically, we have to have artificial ice, because even in places like the Northwest Territories, the New York Times did a good story on this. Joey Juneau was a guy who played in the NHL for many, many years. They don't have consistent ice. The freeze-thaw cycle is so different than it was over history that they actually have to put artificial ice in. It's expensive. The democratization of the game, the access to this is gone. Who plays the sport now? Only people that are trying to get to the NHL. The normal skating, or like the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, just for outdoor activity and things to do for kids, is gone because it's not there, it's not free, so you have to go to these expensive. It's up to $500, $600 where I live in Connecticut per hour of ice. You haven't bought a pair of skates yet, and you can't afford to play. So it really starts to mean access is denied, and it's just such a metaphor for so much of what we do. The people that are not polluting as much are taking a lot of the brunt of the effects of pollution. And if you look, the outdoor game has become a thing in the NHL, where you go out and they have this game that's frozen outside, and it's wonderful. And kids from Moscow to Montreal that play in the NHL turn into 10-year-olds. They're like, oh my God, I learned to skate on this. But the new generation isn't. They have to go inside, and the irony is that's all fossil fuel based, which is only contributing to the same spiral of more pollution, less ice. It's not just winter athletes. We just watched the Summer Olympics, but a couple years ago in Beijing, they had to change when the marathon was. They changed the marathon this summer to outside the city because the heat index was so high. I remember working out in New York, getting up and hearing on the radio, well, it's a heat index day. It's bad air quality. It's actually unhealthy to work out. And you kind of stop and pause. Like, when did it become unhealthy to work out? You're going to get those days. We've had those days, but we're getting a lot of those days. And so it is affecting sports in a really profound way. But you'd be forgiven to say who the heck cares with all the problems we have, whether some fat goalie in Philadelphia is playing on a pond or not. But sports, again, go back to the beginning, is based your performance on health. Phil Knight once said, if you own a pair of, he's trying to sell sneakers, but he said, if you breathe, you're an athlete. Mike Jordan isn't the only athlete out there. Everybody in this room's an athlete. You go for walks, you do whatever, you have a body. And so he said, it was a great line, if you have a body, you're an athlete. I would say if you have a body, you're an environmentalist. Do you care about the air you breathe, the water you drink? It's not just Mike Phelps worried about the quality of the water that's in his local river. It's every one of us every time you take a breath. This matters to your health and therefore your performance. So I think it's something that we need to pay attention to because there is no aspect of our society that's not affected negatively by the pollution, by climate change particularly, and that rests solely on fossil fuel right now. I guess primarily on fossil fuel right now. So it's something that we have to care about whether we want to, and it's not a grandson, granddaughter, next generation thing. It is today. There's people that lives are compromised, lives are lost because of the amount of pollution that we're experiencing on a daily basis. So, the sports you can dismiss, but it's a metaphor for all of us.
So if I'm reading between the lines here and taking something away from everything that you're telling us, I think it's that we need to change this conversation and make sure that it's relevant, that you're speaking in a language that's relevant to your customers, your constituents, whoever you're talking to. And you just gave us 3, 4, 5 stories that are directly applicable to anyone. So going back to the language, I think it has a lot to do with that, and making it important to people by the way we talk to them.
I absolutely agree, and it's become politicized. When I joined the Riverkeeper Board in New York, it's basically cleaning up the Hudson River. It's the eastern version of the Mississippi. It's 300 miles long. The watersheds, on the border of Canada, and it's just a thing of beauty. There used to be sturgeon, all kinds of things in there. Of course, it's been polluted many, many years, and so there's this big cleanup effort. It was a valuable kind of use of time when I first retired. I really enjoyed it. There's some good people there, but someone on the board called me a surprise environmentalist, and I just was taken aback by that. Back to that Phil Knight statement. What does an environmentalist look like? How did this become politicized? Who here, no matter where on the political spectrum they are, doesn't care about their son or daughter having fresh air and clean water and just a healthy environment? I mean, if there's a less divisive thing out there, I don't know of it. So I don't know how this became politicized, but now the terms we start to use gets us in our little tribes. And it's a shame because when you start talking about better and quality of life and improvements across society, socioeconomically and racially and gender, everybody's affected by this. So that should be something that unites us much more than divides us, and I think the language matters.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about resiliency.
Yeah.
Here at Greenbuild, we had a resilience summit a few weeks ago, and resilience means so much to so many different people. At Brightcore, you focus on organizational and energy resiliency. How do those two things relate and work best together?
It's a great question. And again, it's a word that's hard to define in a way. I think the first step in resiliency is lowering your demand, okay? If you have a passive home versus a conventional house, you simply have, and I wish I was supposed to look up the number of days that you can actually survive in cold weather, but it's multiples of what a conventional would be. If you lost power today, and years ago, this really came to the fore in Hurricane Sandy in New York. It was just, look at New York. Nothing matters. You scrape it off, you keep going. Suddenly, the city stopped. We had that Hurricane Sandy, the flooding, buildings that we thought were pretty resilient ended up having all their technology and whatnot on the bottom floor. It flooded, subway stopped, the economy stopped. Society really was fraying, you know? I mean, it was amazing how fast you go from the world's biggest, most important city to, oh my God, you have your thumb in your mouth and saying, where can I get an outlet to plug in my phone? I don't know what to do. I was without power in Connecticut for 13 days. And at first, you know, I got young kids and it was kind of cool. We camped and it was getting cold. It was in October, as I recall. And so the first few days, who cares? We all huddled in a room. But after about day 4 or 5, there was no water, there was no power, there was no heat. Things start getting a little ugly. And, you know, this just-in-time economy, now there's not food being delivered and there's nowhere to put it. So resiliency's now rightfully a buzzword, but if you can diminish your demand, imagine, you know, having a house that doesn't require much electricity. Now your generator can run longer. Lots of people in my neighborhood generators, it all went quiet and dark, and then you hear the hum of the generators. But they're okay for a couple hours. They have to be, you know, oil changed and everything else. The fossil fuel generators, they don't anticipate days and days, and that's changing now. But if we can get off fossil fuels, if we can start to look at microgrids, diminish the demand, we do that. I mean, it's a resiliency play. Every time you change a light bulb to LED, it's a little less demand. So getting back online is a little easier. Running on a generator is a little easier. If you can just not use as much, that's kind of the first step. Second step is, of course, make it more localized. I was in New York years ago when we lost power in the east, and it was amazing. It was like, you know, a squirrel chewed through a damn wire in Ohio, and, you know, elevators aren't working in Manhattan. We're so tied together. That's not resiliency. That's a problem in the middle of the country, created a blackout in the east. That's vulnerability, you know, national security issues, economy, health, everything. So you're starting to see more conversations about microgrids. You know, large campuses, whether they're colleges or industrial, are starting to say, I'll rely on my own. Nobody does this better than the military. We were talking last night to some of our friends from Lend-Lease who work in the military, with military construction. And you think how hardened their facilities must be, from everything from a cyber attack to a flood. And something to think about is, it is regional, right? So we just experienced terrible flooding in the east. So, well, if you're going to make something resilient, you better anticipate that. That's one of the big challenges we have in the east. It would be different out here. Maybe there's, you know, heat index days that you have to deal with, or extreme dry weather, or wildfires. So you have to take into account what the local threats are in order to be resilient. But the whole idea of resiliency, whether it's, you know, in a business or athletically, is being able to handle multiple stress and continue to perform. And I mean, it's something that we go through in all of our training. You know, that's the reason, you know, the residencies and doctors have such a hard time, you know, not sleeping and going through this work under pressure. Our buildings go through massive amounts of pressure, and it's pretty amazing what they're able to accomplish. But the world has changed, and we cannot build and we can't retrofit in the same way we used to. There's bigger, more pronounced threats, just in terms of, you know, the natural storms we're experiencing. So, you know, diminishing the demand, getting more localized, and backup generation, as this becomes more integrated, and you're starting to see it in terms of a lot of the, you know, across different utility territories, they're now starting to say, well, there's incentive now for batteries when you're putting in solar. It is moving the needle toward being self-sustaining, and that's what resiliency is all about.
Absolutely. Now, we get the question every time we do a panel for Greenbuild. We always get a question about funding and how we convince skeptics at an organization to make the investment in sustainability. And you talked about performance, you talked about building things better. But what advice can you give our folks in the audience about convincing those stakeholders in the boardroom or their clients about how to make this investment if you still have people on the fence?
Well, look, it's easy for me, who's selling it, and all of you guys in the audience selling your wares, to say everybody should have this because it's great. Well, everybody doesn't have a dollar to spend on it. We feel at Brightcore is that, you know, a large part of the logjam is the funding mechanisms. And so the two founders of our company spent 15 years on Wall Street in non-traditional assets. They were incredible about understanding how to customize the underwriting of these things, whether it's a geothermal retrofit, solar panels. I think we all understand that there's, the power purchase agreements have really changed the way people now view these things. What's beautiful about what we're doing here and what we're talking about is, again, the idea of better. There's so many ancillary benefits, but maybe the biggest one, and the one we normally lead with, is the financial benefits. If you're eliminating waste, it's going in your building, one way or another, it's going to translate to financial efficiency, financial savings. The operating expense and the maintenance expense on what you guys are trying to deliver, what we're trying to put in buildings, is superior to what it's replacing. So an LED bulb, the burn hours can be up to 100,000 hours. That matters to places like Madison Square Garden, where I used to play, where you have to get, these large, could be 70 feet above the ice surface to change these things. So you're not doing that all the time. The quality stays the same. The actual demand on burn hours can be 60% less. Something as simple as a light bulb, but it ends up mattering. So when we went into that same school in Westchester, it was a $2 million lighting job, but they're saving, it's probably a 6-year payback for them. They're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and we can actually underwrite these things. So no money out of their pocket and cash flow positive from day one. Of course, we're taking our cut. This sounds like an infomercial, so I apologize for it. We're not the only ones who do this. The point being, what we're replacing isn't just better in terms of your comfort and your aesthetics, it's better in terms of the financial performance. And so very few things in the world have that many benefits when you change it. And you're looking at municipalities, you're looking at school systems, they don't have a dollar. You're looking at a lot of the private industry. They're saying, oh, we got money, we're Madison Square Garden, or we're, Coca-Cola. But it's earmarked for other things. And if you can come along and say, look, man, this thing is going to save you money in your operating expenses, it really matters. I think it's the second highest budget item in schools, for instance. Why the hell are the schools having lights that are anything other than the best that we have? They're more expensive and they're poor performance, and our students are out there trying to take SATs and everything else in a crappy environment. If I can come along and change them, well, the world's not, problems aren't solved by one school moving it this forward, but that school's better, and the idea gets out there, and the money is real cash that's saved. So to answer your question more directly, oftentimes, not always, when we're talking about sustainability and greening, there's hard numbers behind it that are just a better financial return than what you have in your building. And even if it's not end of useful life, you can come in and take that stuff out now while it's still, viable, and put a superior product in and get superior performance financially.
Thank you. All right, we're getting close to time, so I'm going to leave us with one final question. You started by talking about potential on the ice, potential in business, potential in sustainability. And as an athlete, you know more about reaching potential than probably many of us in this room. So what's your final advice to the audience about reaching our sustainability potential, both in business and then about reaching our personal potential in our careers?
It's a good question. I think the thing that frustrates me the most is, obviously we have problems, and it's easy for me to sit up on stage and say, we got to solve global warming. Well, we do. Do we have all the answers? We don't. Are we close with a lot of the off-the-shelf technology? We are. We start to have real problems when we've outfitted every building with the best technology and we're still nowhere near the solution. We have off-the-shelf technology. Our company doesn't go out there and say, gee, you own this building and you're gonna become this pilot project. It's gonna be an experiment and we'll see what happens. We're talking about things that have been tried and true. Solar panels, we know how they perform in the right, application. We know how LED lights perform. We know how building controls affect your operating costs. This stuff works, and it's off the shelf, and it exists today. Just the inertia that's out there. We go along doing things that we've always done, and to me, that's the most frustrating thing. We have 50, 60, 70% of the solution out there, but we're just not cracking through and embracing it. You guys in this room know there's unbelievable cutting-edge things going on over there, and every year it improves, and we have to continue to improve, no question. But the technology that exists today is not being deployed at the rate it needs to be to keep up. We're better than we've ever been in terms of understanding this and coming up with solutions, but the problems are worse than they've ever been. So that gap, until we start really getting aggressive in how we approach this, is going to continue to widen. So I think reaching potential is like anything else. It's a mindset. Give yourself the best chance. The worst thing you can do as an athlete is to leave any of your game on the table, to retire and say, you know, if I just worked a little harder, I could have gone to the next level. I could have done one more thing. Maybe I would have won the championship. Maybe I could have left a mark. You know, the thing that there's so many frustrations that we have in life, but unfulfilled potential to me is one of the most difficult ones to swallow. And at least you can walk away when you're done your athletic career, you're done your professional career, or we as a society, where will we be in 50 years? I don't know. Where will we be in 10? I don't know. But give ourselves a chance to not only solve this thing called global warming, but to reach our potential as students, as professionals, as people. You know, we're making our bed, man. Make it as good as you can. You give yourself the best chance of having the best lighting, the best HVAC system, the best environment in which to live, to learn, to work, to exist. And that is the only way. If you don't put that fundamental thing there, you'll ever come close to your potential.
Potential. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate it. Thank you for
so
being
much
with
for having
us.
me. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.